Welcome to the CISSP Cyber Training Podcast, where we provide you the training and tools you need to pass the CISSP exam the first time. Hi, my name is Sean Gerber, and I'm your host for this action-packed, informative podcast. Join me each week as I provide the information you need to pass the CISSP exam and grow your cybersecurity knowledge. All right, let's get started. Hey, all, it's Sean Gerber with CISSP Cyber Training, and I hope you all are having a great day today. Today is the day that we're going to be talking about Domain 5, and we're going to talk about identity and access management as it relates to the CISSP exam. But before we do, we are going to get into a couple little nuances that have occurred recently in the news that I think are probably appropriate to discuss. There was, obviously, if you're in the United States, you're probably aware of this, and if you're around the world, you probably are as well, but there were a couple breaches recently, or incidents I should say, that occurred with Caesars Palace in the state of Las Vegas, Nevada, or as the city of Las Vegas, Nevada, as well as now MGM casinos that are in that location as well. But I guess I was just going to talk real quickly about Caesars and what I've heard about the MGM hack. And, you know, if you think about it, it's like any other hack out there, right? Except for it's like Ocean's 11, where, you know, people hack into these systems and take money or whatever they're doing with it. Well, in the case of this is a ransomware attack that seems to have been perpetrated, at least from a Caesar standpoint, by an outside third-party vendor that was able to get social engineered into their network. And it's interesting how this has turned out. And the ransomware attack that did occur, it seems like Caesars has paid the ransom as of the time of this podcast. And I know MGM was still on the fence deciding what they were going to do. But just the note that I have here from InfoSec Security, that right now Caesars is about a $3 billion company. And so you're talking a lot of money. And if you all haven't been aware, it basically, a ransomware event took their network. And in the process of taking their network, it did have access to their rooms. It had access to different types of personal data. It's one of those situations where there was a network that supports the overall Caesars environment, and it more or less took that down. But because of that, they also took down slot machines in that environment. They weren't able to get access to ATMs. So it brought their business to a standstill. And this is one of the things I have brought up time and again to senior leaders around the country and to folks that I deal with on a routine basis. It's not like the old days where you have an opportunity to just say, you know what, it probably won't happen to me. It's highly likely you will get hit at some point in time. And so it's very imperative that you do have a solid DR, and which is your disaster recovery and business continuity plan, set up for your company. It is not something you can mess around with and delay. You do need to have that, because even if you have that in place, there's no guarantee that something like this happens. You still will be down for a period of time. So it sounds like right now Caesars has paid $15 million to the extortionists to prevent the data from going public. So, I mean, you're talking a lot of money. That's one of the higher ransomware payments that I have seen, and the attackers pretty much know what they had. So therefore, they wanted a top dollar for it. But the problem is that $15 million is just the beginning, because they're now going to have to go through, ideally, I don't know if they're going to do this or not, this is me just making some suppositions, is that they're going to have to go through and reinstall or redo a lot of these systems. I mean, completely, like gut them, like throw them away, bare metal restores they're going to have to do. So that is just Caesars alone. That's not even the MGM properties. So this is very quickly going to get into, my guesstimate is probably $100 million or more that this is going to end up costing them. So you're talking a lot of money. When your company makes $3 billion a year and you're talking $15 million was just given out in ransomware payments, that is a huge amount, because the margins that these guys make, as many as people may think that the casinos and other businesses have really high margins, basically meaning they're making 20, 30, 40% on their money, on their investment, that is not the case. Now, casinos could be different. I don't know from not living in that environment, but I would say that like any other business out there, if you're making 7 to 15% on every transaction, you're considering yourself good. In the case of these guys, who knows? But if you're not making, say you're making 10% on $3 billion, what is that? That's $30 million is 10%. I know it's probably more than that. It's probably 300 million. 300 million is 10%. So $300 million is your margin of what you make. Well, you just gave away 15 million of that to an attacker. So it's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. And I highly recommend that if you are in the security space, you get your CISSP done, because the opportunity is going to continue to grow. But you do need to make sure that if you, whatever company you go work for, you do a really good job of helping them with their business continuity and disaster recovery planning. Okay, in this podcast, we're going to be getting into the management of identification and authentication, and that which really goes into also the future trends, which deal with blockchain. They also deal with AI and the various aspects that you'll have to manage when it comes to IoT. But before we do, we're going to first start off with an introduction around what is MFA, what is identification, and so forth. So when we're dealing with identification and authentication, you need to understand it's one of the key factors in maintaining cybersecurity. It's a thing that we use a lot, within an organization. And if you have a good identification and authentication strategy for your business, then it really does take a lot of the headache away from what you're trying to accomplish from a cybersecurity standpoint. Where you don't have this, if you don't have a good solid authentication mechanisms in place, it can become very painful and very problematic. The reason I say that is this comes down to automation. If you have the automation in place and you have good providers, third-party providers that provide a version of SSO or of multi-factor within your company, you dramatically reduce the amount of time you have to spend maintaining a system that will ensure that people are authenticated and identified within your company. And rightfully so, just because you have a company and you're working in this company, everybody has to be authenticated and identified before you go and can get access to certain systems. Well, if you're going to have that, if you're a security practitioner and you go to a company that has a solid third-party product in place that provides multi-factor authentication or integrates with an SSO type product, then you are in a situation where you can work on other things, such as we just mentioned the disaster recovery and business continuity planning. You could do that and work on that. Whereas if you don't have a good situation where you have third parties that are doing your multi-factor or your SSO, you're now going to have to focus your efforts and time on something like this. And realistically, you need to be able to work both. So it's really important that you have a good identification mechanism in your company, and it does play a significant role within the security of your overall organization. So now what you need to understand is what is the difference between identification and authentication. Now, when you're dealing with identification, that is something who defines who you are. So that can be done through biometrics, it can be done in different ways, but it defines who is Sean Gerber versus who is my alter ego Enrique Gerber, right? So if y'all don't know, I have an alter ego. His name is Enrique Antonio Gerber. You probably are asking why. Well, real quick digression. My name is Sean, spelled S-H-O-N. And guess what? Many people screw it up when they try to spell it, and I just really don't like it. I'm not a big fan of it. So when I was flying airplanes, people used to call me Gerbs. But now that I don't fly anymore, nobody calls me that term, so I can't really call myself Gerbs. So I have to, when I meet people that I don't know, just to have a laugh, they ask, "What's your name?" And I say, "Enrique," and they give me a really funny look. And then when I tell them my middle name is Antonio, they really look at me funny because I'm a Hispanic man with a Italian middle name, and I look really white. So yeah, that's quite funny, quite entertaining. But that being said, you got to have something that will define who you are. Somebody from Sean versus Enrique. And this can be done obviously through, you've got passwords, biometrics, smart cards. All of those things are ways that you can help identify people. And you also can deal with, do you have a smart card? If you all don't know what a smart card is, it's basically, in the military, we had a smart card that had a chip in it, and that chip, just all it has is a certificate that would verify who you say you are. If I go into certain jobs, we'll have there's the HID systems, but it's an NFC near field communication card reader, and you put it up to a little beep beep, and it will beep and let you in. Those are those are smart cards. Those are different types of ways to define who you are. And now does that mean that that's when you're dealing with a smart card, that's something you have, that's something you hold in your hand. Therefore, that allows you certain level of access, allows you to get into a building, allows you to open up a room. But then maybe there's situations that's something that you know, such as your password. You know that you have a password and you are utilizing that password, and that's giving you access as well. There could be another thing where something that you are as well, where you have your biometrics as related to your eyeballs. Those are pieces that might be, you look at a retina scanner and it tells them who you are. You know your username. That's something that you know. You like, my name is Sean Gerber. It could be sean.gerber@xyz.com. All of those things are important for you to try to understand and be able to communicate with your leaders on how to authenticate yourself to different mechanisms within your company. So it's important that you do that. Now, also when it comes to business critical pieces, when you're aspects of identification and authentication, if you have a business critical process that's running, you want to ensure that you have proper identification and authentication around it. Now let's look at an example of a system that is sitting within the business network. You may have to get access to this system. You may have to go through a turnstile. And to get access to that turnstile, you have to use a smart card. So you get through the smart card, through the turnstile, into your office. And then to get into your office itself, maybe you have to have another smart card that allows a beep beep, which allows you into your office. You now get into your office. That's a barrier of security. You now sit down at your computer. You have to have a username. That username has to be associated with, in many cases, not always, but most cases, with a password. You have to know both of those, the username and the password. Now that gets you in and logged into the system. Let's say, for example, you have a web application that logs into a server that has a web portal front end that you need to know some level of a username and password again, and you need to have a multi-factor authentication, which would be like an app that's on your phone, such as like Ping ID, or Okta has those, or Google Authenticate, Microsoft Authenticate. They all have those type authenticators. You then can log in with that authenticator, and now you get access to the application. So you see there's multiple layers of defense, of depth, that you have to go through just to get access to this application. So this is great, and that's what you want to have. Now, where this gets bypassed is if you have VPNs and you allow people to log in from a VPN from their home, and now you still could have the multi-factor enabled, right, which is good. Hopefully you have that, but you just bypassed a whole bunch of levels of security by adding that VPN. So then when you do something along those lines, you have to make sure that you have a good authentication mechanism for your virtual private network, your VPNs, or you have to have some other software that does that for you. So it's very important that you understand all of these methods to get access to your environment. Now, we talk about what is MFA, what is multi-factor authentication. And basically what it does, it comes down to, is another factor that you have outside of your typical username and password to give you access to an environment. And it typically comes into different areas. Something you have, something you know, something you are. And there's a new one that you'll see that I've seen people talk about with the CISSP. It's something you do, right? Now, the something you do isn't nearly as effective as something you are or have, but there is that fourth dimension that I've heard about, is something that you actually accomplish, something you do. Now, what you want to do is you want to roll out your multi-factor authentication to your organization. And like I had mentioned earlier, this could be done through third parties, such as Ping Identity is one, or Microsoft Authenticator. You want to have a third party that will provide this multi-factor authentication. It could also be done through a token system. I know in the past, RSA tokens were set up, and you'd have this little key fob, and in this fob, you would actually have it'd be like little numbers that you'd have to enter these numbers into your computer. Very similar to the same concept you have with a multi-factor token that's on your phone, like such as Ping or Google Authenticator. And you have to, it's important to have this because it now forces that if anybody's trying to gain access to these systems, they are now out of band. They now have to be able to get access to your phone to be able to use it. Now, they can social engineer you, which is many of the attacks we talk about as a cybersecurity professional. There are ways they can social engineer you into giving that information to them. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to roll this out to your organization. Now, single sign-on, this is also called what they call federated identity. And how this basically works is that you have one username, one password that you log into, and you enter that single sign-on, and it then provides the credentials to the tokens to allow you access to the various pieces of within your organization. So if you have an application that is tied into SSO, I now have to just remember one username and one password. Whereas if you don't have SSO integrated into your applications, you have to remember multiple usernames and multiple passwords. And for that to happen, when you have multiple of anything, what happens? Well, many times people will then reuse those. And so if you're dealing with a bunch of employees that are trying to, you're providing them a service, if you do not provide them some level of SSO, they will reuse their usernames and passwords multiple times. And in many cases, their passwords will be very simple. So if you if a hacker were to compromise one set of credentials, what is he or she going to do? They will compromise another set just because of the fact of password reuse and username reuse. So it's important to have some level of SSO through your organization, and the overall risks it helps mitigate is the fact that you don't have all these extra username and passwords that are being reused sitting out there on the web. Now, if you go to Troy Hunt has got I've Been Pwned as a really good place for you to be able to pull up and find out if your accounts, if your usernames and passwords have been compromised. I will tell you that my wife, I love her to death, more than you can ever imagine. However, she loves to use the same username and password. So I have gone through, when I see she adds them to our password vault, I go in and change those. And she isn't very happy with me, but the point comes into is you don't want those usernames and passwords to be reused, just because the fact is you compromise one, you compromise many. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some regulatory compliance as it relates to multi-factor authentication and the aspects that go along with that. So as you all know, regulatory requirements are happening at a breakneck speed. Now, I say that, but they're breakneck, not like you're running in the Olympics, but they're breakneck when you're dealing with the overall laws that are out there, just because there's so much that's changing, and the laws in place, the large regulatory and compliance requirements have been out there for a while, but what they do is they make tweaks to them, they make additions to them. So there's various global regulations that you're seeing, and there's also various data privacy laws that are coming out, both from the EU, there's the CCPA, which deals with California, there's also the China data privacy laws. There's lots of different data privacy laws that are coming onto the books to protect their citizens. That's what countries do. When you're dealing with GDPR, we've talked about it through the CISSP cyber training, that the ultimate goal of GDPR is to provide user consent and data minimization. So you want to have some level of data anonymization, data minimization. There's different aspects that go into GDPR, such as data privacy impact assessments. So there's lots of nuances that go to the GDPR piece. Then from a United States standpoint, there's HIPAA. These are access controls around healthcare information. And then you have PCI DSS, which affects many countries that accept credit cards. So this would be your payment card industry data security standards. Now, Caesars and MGM are going to fall directly in the face of these PCI DSS standards. And for them to be hacked, it's highly likely that maybe something was compromised as it relates to how they followed the PCI DSS standards. So more to follow with that, and I anticipate it could potentially affect them dramatically. Basically, PCI DSS states that if you were to do things fraught in a way that would cause them to lose credit card information and or cash, they do reserve the right to basically turn off any access to credit cards. So it could be a huge hit. So they're going to end up paying, Caesars just paid $15 million to the ransom people. They're probably going to pay a monster fine to the credit card industry just because they want to keep credit cards rolling into Caesars because they need people to bet money. So it's important that you have, to do this, you need to have compliance audits as well. So we got internal and external audits, and the difference between obvious those are the internal audits are usually done by folks within your organization. They can be done by people within your security team. They also can be done and accomplished by folks within compliance or your audit organization. At the end of the day, if you're going to do an internal audit real quickly, you probably should get somebody that's outside your organization that understands IT to a point to be able to ask the right questions, but is not in your overall chain of command or basically knows where all the dead bodies live. Because the purpose is that you want someone from the outside to take a look at what you do to find gaps and to find holes that you typically, one, may be hiding, which we don't want, or two, aren't even aware of. There's external audits. You'll go with third parties that will help you with these external audits. And I deal with these folks on a routine basis, at least once a year. I have an external auditor come in and deal with different auditing with my company. And I work with them directly on security matters. That's what you would do. You would deal with security audits. You would work directly with these folks and help them provide them the information they need to help do a solid and legitimate audit. Now, the external audits, they could be done by very competent and very expensive people, such as Grant Thornton, Deloitte. Lots of different third parties can do audits. You will pay a significant amount of money for that. If you can get smaller audits, depending upon what you're needing to get audited for, they may be more niche and they may be just a set of contractors that can help you. But at the end of the day, somebody from the external side is going to cost you some money. Now, the audit frequency will be dependent upon what are the requirements tied to it. You may have a situation where that your audit company comes out once a year and they will then audit how your authentication mechanisms are in place. They may come out once every 6 months, depending upon the industry that you are in. It's important also when you're dealing with the audits of maintaining and your records for this. Now, what this comes down to is when you're dealing with authentication, you may need to maintain your authentication logs for a period of time. And it's important that you work with your IT folks to come up with a good strategy and your audit folks to know what they're looking for. So as an example, the audit team may say, do you have logs? And you have the logs for your authentication and for anybody that logs into your system. But what ends up happening is, say you only keep them for 7 days. Well, if an event happens or an incident occurs, if you only keep them for 7 days, odds are highly likely that you will not know how they got into your organization. So you'll need to work with the auditors. Say you come up with a plan, I'm going to keep this for, say, 3 months. You're going to want to then express that to the auditors, and then they're going to probably want to look at what you have kept to make sure that if you say you keep logs for 90 days, they're going to verify that you keep logs for 90 days. So it's important that you bring them into the overall fray as you're talking about this, and they're going to want to look at all of those different aspects of your company. So I already kind of talked about the penalties and the legal consequences that can come to this, but bottom line is, let's just use MGM as an example and Caesars. They're going to pay a lot. Just the $15 million that Caesars paid is just the tip of the iceberg. They're going to pay all kinds of damages. There's highly likely they're going to end up going to court. They're going to be paying money out of court costs. They're going to be paying arbitration expenses. They're going to be paying all kinds of things. So this is going to quickly expand. I'll use an example of the Target. In the United States, we have a supermarket, not a supermarket. It's like Walmart, but it's Target. And they were compromised by a third party industrial, the HVAC system. And that third party, when it was all said and done, after I think the breach occurred, paying all the fines, reputational hit, the whole 9 yards, it was a couple $100 million is what it ended up costing them, if I'm not mistaken. So this is going to be a humongous expense for Caesars and for MGM. And the reputational damage, I think, is going to be pretty substantial as well. How do you go and you give your credit card to people and you assuming that they're taking the adequate steps to maintain the protection of your credit card, that's gonna take some time. It's gonna have some pain and suffering for a few people. So there is some things you're gonna have to work through. At least they're gonna have to work through in regards to that. So let's talk about future trends of authentication and how that could potentially be a factor, especially as you're dealing with the security side of the house. So we talked about biometrics. So biometrics obviously deal with facial recognition, fingerprinting, iris scans, and voice recognition. However, how is that going to work? And as we deal with the AI world, I will tell you that you can get online and if someone can get enough of your voice, you can put it into these AI generators and it will generate your voice. I would say I've got enough podcasts out there right now that someone could come up and make a podcast just using my voice. That probably wouldn't be a good idea because people would fall asleep. But if you wanted to have something where maybe there's a commercial and you're trying to run with a person's voice in that commercial, you could use their voice and the AI will generate whatever you want them to do. So when you're dealing with voice recognition, that could be a very substantial thing you're going to have to work through, especially as it relates to the AI. So as a security professional, you may want to ask yourself, do you want to use voice recognition for one of your mechanisms to validate who they potentially are? Another part comes into facial recognition, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But if you have AI that can make faces of an individual that look somewhat like them, or looks like them right there, you could end up being in a situation where your facial recognition software may not be as efficient and effective. So folks that are providing these products and services to the general public, you as a security professional are going to have to ensure you do your due diligence around these of going, okay, well, will your software be able to detect AI generated images? That'll be one of the questions you'd want to ask them. And then you'd want to have them demonstrate how it could do that. Another aspect obviously is voice recognition. Can it determine if there's someone's voice and so forth? So it's important that you really understand, and this is why I say in security, it's ever changing. There's no one out there that knows everything. And you as a security practitioner are going to have to be up on all these things. Now, does that mean you have to be an expert in them? No. But does that mean that you need to be able to converse and have a conversation basically based on the understanding of the foundational aspects of the technology? Yes, you are going to have to do that. And I will tell you that's probably one of my biggest challenges that I struggle with. And especially being a really old guy like I am, I've got my walker in the corner and I kind of have my geriatric stuff, calisthenics that I do. It's something that's a challenge, and it's a challenge for, doesn't matter what your age, just to try to stay ahead of all of these different pieces. Now, another one is blockchain. How do you deal with the blockchain and identification? So if you all haven't been looking and understanding blockchain, right? It's that technology is taking bits and pieces of what you do, of the different information in it, and it's using this in a randomized type environment. Well, if you can use the blockchain to help identify people in that format, that would be extremely valuable. The question is it, when you talk to vendors, are they using the resources from multiple systems to put together the overall string to determine if it's you or not you? Those are important pieces that you're going to have to try to understand. And you're going to have to understand as it relates to its resistance to potential tampering. So when you're dealing with blockchain, right? So you're dealing with multiple systems. I used to have a blockchain, a miner that I had in my basement that was running, right? And that miner would go and run for Bitcoin. It's using multiple resources to go and create whatever you want it to do, whether it's from a mining for different types of finding numbers that are going to be for creating this virtualized Bitcoin, or using that blockchain for other types of activities. You're going to have to understand how does that work. The second thing was, when it comes to security around it, is that you want to understand blockchain because it is geographically and it's dispersed in many cases. It could be geographically, it could just be by system. It is very resistant to tampering with it. You'd have to have access to all of these systems and have access to the blockchain itself to be able to tamper with it. So you have to determine, when you're looking in the future trends, is that a technology that you want to integrate within your organization and with your company? I'll tell you that it's interesting, it's unique. I think there's definitely use cases for it. However, I don't know if it's really just there yet, or if it ever will get there. But it's just kind of interesting to see how blockchain it kind of spurted up about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been out there obviously for a while before then, and now it's kind of got tapped down, especially with the generative AI aspects that are coming out. But again, it is complex, it's resource intensive, and it does lack a widespread understanding, which makes it a bit of a challenge. Now, as we get into AI and the machine learning piece of this in your ML, when you're dealing with AI, obviously you want to have it to monitor user behavior and detect anomalies. That would be one of the pieces that you would want your machine learning capability to do. And again, it's to sort through all of the gobs of information and be able to come up with a response that is what you're looking for specifically. Now, there's many different types of AI that's being used, and companies are trying to get on the AI bandwagon, especially from a security standpoint, because as we all know, there is a massive security shortage for people. Well, if you can use AI to bridge that gap, that's a really valuable tool. But one thing you're going to have to understand is when you utilize AI is the tool that you're using, is the language, the machine learning product, what you're really looking for, is that what's going to meet your need? 2, how is it working in your environment? What are the different types of activity that it creates, what it does? And then are there any sort of privacy concerns that are associated with that piece of product that you're making? I was looking at an article just the other day about AI, and there was I know right now, who is it? Oh, it's the repository for GitLab. GitLab has got out there where they feel that they have an AI to help you generate source code. They feel so confident that it will generate source code for you that they will go to bat for you if anybody sues you as it relates to infringement, right? Copyright infringement. So it's interesting to see where that's going. Well, they're building these AI algorithms into the different security tools to just help detect issues that they may have. And I'm seeing this now also in vulnerability scanners. They're putting something of AI in it. Honestly, I don't know how that all completely works. I have a good understanding of how the generative AI piece of this works, but they're using these various models that they're creating this environment, and they're pulling these feeds in to help it go more or less. It's really a Gucci if this then that type of thing, and it's working at light speed to be able to make that happen. Now, you have different types of authentication as it relates to the AI, and we'll kind of break into a couple of those. So you have your risk-based authentication. This is where you have a dynamic AI, and these are the AI algorithms are used to assess the risk level of the access request. So basically, it's looking at where's the location, what is the device type, what are some other factors that, what is the time of the day? All of those pieces can be fed into this AI to help reduce the risk of that person accessing this information. Then it also looks for any sort of discrepancies between that. So let's just say, for example, Sean always logs in at this time, at this date. He's always in this location. And so therefore, that would make sense that Sean is logging in. But if Sean logs in at 2 a.m. from this location, and he's logging in from a different country, then maybe that is not Sean. So it's an important understanding that this machine learning models are looking at all these different aspects in these behaviors. Now you have behavioral biometrics. These are where they get into keystroke dynamics. This is where your machine learning algorithms will look at different ways to understand how are you logging in. So for example, I don't know if you all saw in the news, there was a situation where they mentioned that ML could actually get your password based on you typing the keys on your keyboard. Same concept. It goes through enough permutations, it may figure out that. Now, it's going to have a microphone sitting by your keyboard for that to occur. But if for some reason you need the ML understands how do you type in your keys, it can know that, okay, by how Sean does his certain typing of his monkey butt password, then that's not my password, by the way. If he types in the password monkey butt and he does that in a certain way, it will know that that's the way Sean does it. So it's different types of authentication just by how Sean will log in and enter in monkey butt as a password. So again, it also can detect when you're dealing with other behavioral biometrics, how you walk, how you talk, how you use your phone. All of these things, these sensors are watching all of this to determine, hey, are you actually Sean, or are you the alter ego Enrique? It's all designed for that. Now, when you have adaptive multi-factor is basically smart MFA, and it determines the best combination of multi-factor methods based on the real-time risk assessment that's going on. And it will learn what is the best authentication methods you should be using based on the time and who you are and what your behavior is. So that I have never dealt with it. I saw this online and I was like, interesting, because I didn't even know that was a capability, but that's what they're building out at this point. And you'll see more. And with all of these, what you're going to see is they're all going to come to the market in various forms and formats, and they're going to get implemented in various ways. But then the ones that really stick are the ones that are going to be adopted. The ones that don't will obviously go away, but you're going to have to understand if somebody comes to you and asks a question around your social media identification, do you have a plan for that? And can you at least articulate that? And it's going to force you to go and read it, understand it, so that you can then in turn kind of come up with a point of view around it. Now, when you're dealing with social media analytics and identification, again, you've probably seen this. Facebook does a really good job of this, of looking at anything that's available on the social media to verify identities. You can get this through, obviously, they have Facebook and the other social media platforms, Instagram. They have an SSO capability. So if you federate your identity, where you log into Facebook, you use your Facebook credentials, and it will verify the validation of Sean on Facebook, will then allow you to log into XYZ. But Facebook is also watching how you surf the web. So to verify that, okay, well, Sean's account got compromised, and Sean likes to go look at, I have no idea, we'll go motorhomes. I like motorhomes. So Sean looks at motorhomes, but all of a sudden, Sean's profile starts looking at crazy cat pictures that are hairless, that don't have any hair. And that doesn't seem right. So then it potentially could ask you, hey, is this you? Maybe we're flagging this as a potential compromise. So it's important that all these technologies are going to be getting more and more sophisticated, because the hackers are constantly adjusting and moving as well. So it's important that you understand these pieces and these concepts. Now, natural language processing for chatbot security. And when you're dealing with chatbot, you have advanced voice recognition algorithms will look at secure authentication in these various customer chatbots, and they will look to understand what is the user's intent to help you understand and add another layer of security. The chatbots, I don't know if you know, like with my Cox, my cable company, right? I have Cox Cable. They will ask you your username and authentication, the chatbot will, which then it's authenticating you to your account, but then it also asks for PIN numbers and start asking for other pieces of information to help better authenticate you to your environment. And so those are pieces that you'll have to, it's going to just go and enhance more through these chatbot types of security mechanisms. There's also facial recognition enhancements, right? We talk about that. One of the key things is ensuring that your face is recognized. One, not your AI face, but your actual no kidding face. And they're going to have to I know Apple has put some level of AI built into your phone to ensure that you are the person you say you are. My wife and my daughter were able to actually bypass her phone a couple times at the beginning because they both look very similar, and it allowed my daughter into my wife's phone. But now that has all changed. I know they've been adding more and more security mechanisms to help with that. Phishing detection, there's also machine learning algorithms that are out there to help you determine if there's email phishing, to scan emails and looking for detecting any sort of attempt. Now I'm getting more and more of that spam stuff is actually getting dumped into the spam filters because of this machine learning that's able to look through the emails and understand, is this a legitimate email or is this somebody trying to scam them? Again, this can get immediate notifications to your users if they have any sort of suspicious activity. So it's a really great tool for that. Talked about geofencing and location-based security, again, based on your phone that's tracking you. And if it can base that, hey, Sean, who carries his phone with him all the time, is in Wichita, Kansas, great, but why is Sean in Thailand? That's not the case. Sean shouldn't be in Thailand, so therefore they will fence based on that. So there's various different pieces to this. One of the last two I'm going to kind of get into is credential stuffing prevention. This does help detect patterns consistent with automated bots that are trying to basically breach your accounts or compromise your accounts using stolen credentials. So if they go off to if this then that and they see that your account's been compromised, and now they know they have a large subset of compromised credentials, and they're trying to stuff those in there. They're more or less trying to run all of those against your account. Then that would be a flag for the ML type activities. And they would say this is something that is not normal, and therefore they would flag your account and they would potentially lock it out as well. So again, the ML is designed to help really get rid of all of those pieces that a human was doing in the past, but doing very inefficiently. That's where the machine learning will come into play. And the last one is dealing with IoT device authentication. This is something that, as we've talked about with the CISSP cyber training numerous times, when you get into the process side and you get into IoT, there are numerous ways to authenticate these systems. And many times they are not authenticated well at all, and because there's just so many of them. And when you get lots of sensors, it's really hard to authenticate to the various systems. So what ML will do is it will track normal behavior of these IoT devices and then flag any unusual activities and request for re-authentication. So you could have that set up where your sensor is actually taking a temperature sensor, and it is taking the temperature every day. All of a sudden, this temperature sensor decides to starts stealing data from something else or starts sending other data that doesn't seem right. This will actually request re-authentication, which more or less takes the system offline, which then forces a human to go out and look at the system to make sure it's correct. So again, it will also provide device trustworthiness. You can set a trust score based on the sensor itself, its posture, and its past behavior. So there's a lot of different things you can do with authentication as it relates to the future trends that are coming down with AI and ML. All right, that's all I have for today. I hope you all have a wonderful day and you all enjoy your security studying. Hopefully you're all doing wonderfully well on that and you're studying hard. Go to CISSPcybertraining.com and you can go ahead and check out my website, and you can see where there's a lot of great stuff out there. Some of my students have mentioned time and again that they really like the blueprint and how helpful that is on their studying path. They will also go through the videos, and all the audio content is out there and available for them as well, along with hundreds, I think I'm getting close to about 1,000 questions, CISSP questions that are available for you just as part of CISSP cyber training. Again, the ultimate goal is giving you the information you need to be successful so you can pass the CISSP the first time. All right, have a wonderful day, and we will catch you on the flip side. See ya.